two very interesting wines, and I'm just gonna start, and people can join as they want to join, because it's last time showed the tendency is to go over the time as opposed to not have enough things to say and questions to answer. But what we are talking about is two very different but very similar wines. And I will tell you why they're different and why they're similar. But what is interesting about both of them is that they're blends. Apart from the fact that we will be discussing, the pleasure of drinking young wine, especially considering that we as a winery have been known and have the reputation of holding back wine as opposed to releasing it too soon. And that is definitely on purpose. And that the reasons behind that purpose are nothing too fancy or complex. Everything has to do with our own personal taste. So until 2000, from 2017 until 2013, pretty much all the wines that we had were coming from 19th Street. These are, as mentioned last week, are older vineyards, like our older vineyards. It's just one vineyard. And we had to figure it out. Not only the vineyard, but also how do I put it? Like the way these grape varieties within it, which is Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot, and Cabernet Franc, behave. Now, starting in 2012, the vineyard that we've planted here on the property, which we call the home farm, was something like that started bearing fruit, and we started working with those young vines. Now, as I was mentioning last week, young vine fruit is completely different than old vine fruit, and as capable of surprising you as it is, it's still there's a good chance your guess towards where it's going will be way more on point than fruit from older vines. In older vines, there's just a lot more to explore. So when we started working with those young vines, by 2013, we did our first blend. That's the original Métis. And here's some, it's not really trivia, but the Métis was never supposed to be the name of a line. That's what it naturally became. But the original meaning behind it is blending two things, like Pinot and Cabernet Franc was the first blend. We had never done that. And it was Francois's idea, the name, who he's also partially Métis himself. And it was it's a rather unusual combination of those two grapes that, for whatever reason, even though, now going back to the idea of not sticking to dogmas, even though they were not supposed to work together, they did beautifully. Then the next year, the Chardonnay started producing as well. And this time we did it, actually the 14 Chardonnay is both, 14 Métis Blanc is both 100% single vineyard, the home farm, and 100% Chardonnay. But the name slowly grew from being just the name of a wine to being a name of any wine that had a blending component in it, whether in between vines or in between grape varieties or in between vineyards within a single grape variety, to being the name of the wines that come, generally speaking, from younger vines and are most often as in 99.9% of the time, all the time, apart from the coronavirus time, they are for restaurants and they are for our export markets, just because they're more readily available, being the wines that come from young vines than like the wines from 19th Street. So within that, and don't forget, every single thing for us, it is, we are learning as much about our wines as people are. We're just doing it from a different perspective. So it's always a matter of exploration and letting go of any biases, observing the wines the way they are, and seeing how much you can contribute without any interfering. And is there something that will allow the wine to shine further? That being said, until 2017, we didn't really make any blends apart from the Cuvée Blue, which is the skin fermentation. Those were always sometimes co-fermented, some not, but definitely a blend of grapes. And even the wines from the young vines here, the majority of them, we fermented a single vineyard. Now, I want to talk about two main aspects and also the wines themselves, obviously. But just so I can give you a little bit more of kind of an insight of how we think. So wines from young vines, starting to blend, but never actually setting out to blend in order to make a blended wine. What we set out to do is make the best possible wine we can from the places that we can, or from the places that we have. And in 2017, just so it happened that we had three different grapes, which are Pinot Noir from our home farm vineyard, Cabernet Franc, also from our home farm vineyard, and Gamay from like a Mishturek vineyard, which is very about a 10-minute drive from here. It's close to the Redfoot vineyard that we currently lease. That in our blind tasting trials, when together, and just to give you a little bit of an insight, what I mean by blind tasting trials and how we try not to be influenced by our own bias that we sometimes don't know we have, is we taste everything pretty much blind, because just as much as you can create biases, whether positive or negative, towards producers, labels, whatever it may be, wine origins, grapes, you can do that with the tanks and the foudre and so on and so forth. And in order to be able to act with utmost objectivity, our approach has always been taste blind in order to assess, and that will reveal to you a lot of the things that otherwise may be difficult to see, because all of the years of being told this should work and this shouldn't, or you don't mix this or you mix that, are in the back. So we take all of this apart, we go through the blending trials, and just so it happened in 2017, much like in 2013, that the combination of those three grapes, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, and Gamay, was far better. And I will talk about what better means to us, than the three different grape varieties on their own. So why I'm saying the other aspect of it is that we just happen to do the same thing in white, that is the irreverence that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And it wasn't planned. It happened on its own because the parts that the irreverence is made out of, when together, showed a lot more synergy, a lot more harmony, and a lot more completeness. I think for us, this is a big word that I'm only kind of not discovering now, but trying to put instinct into words for these particular Zoom meetings has made me think way more into how I describe what we experience, that is kind of like undescribable. Or like I'm firm believer into the like not prescribing experiences to people, not telling you what you should be tasting like, but allowing you to find your own references and ask yourself questions, while we can provide the information that we have from an objective factual basis. So the Métier Rouge is then, again, a combination of all of those three grapes that were blended a few, probably about like 2 months before bottling, in order, as we say, for the wines to get to know each other and meet each other and build the bridges that we hoped and believed they have already. While the other one, the Lemberger, which is a Lemberger, Pinot Noir, and Cabernet Franc, is a completely different kind of blend. This is something that happened, like we co-fermented it. And it has a very interesting story behind it. So maybe I'll first tell you about the stories of those two wines, and we can taste while we talk. Because last time, by the way, thank you everyone that emailed me with questions and with advice after the first Zoom meeting that we had last week. Just because it's very helpful.
It's 2 buttons in the top of volume.
And one of my biggest discoveries during the last Zoom meeting was the fact that even though it's funny to taste wine and to talk about it when you believe you shouldn't be telling people what they're tasting. So how to describe the experience within this virtual format is like definitely a learning curve, just in the sense of you don't want to do something that you've been saying for 10 years you're against. And I don't want to tell, it's like, oh, this is what I'm finding in the wine and blah, 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 blah. I want to let you discover the wines for themselves, while providing you with as much tactile information and singular information about them that I can give you. So this is something that I learned last week. Start tasting the wines before you start to talk, because I opened 3 wines last week, and at the end of the tasting, I have tasted like less than half an ounce of 2 of them and barely talked about the wines themselves. But what I can tell you is this. Métier Rouge is from the 2017 vintage. Again, the first vintage where we started working with blends. And at least for us, a very, how do I put it? Like, we've grown up into blending. The Lila is something completely different. Again, a blend, but a blend by birth, like not by by co-fermentation birth, because as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there are many mixed vineyards within many different regions around the world, which in like that get picked together and then co-fermented together. So that's even taking it a step further back of that whole proposition of what blending means. Now, with the Lila, what is very interesting about it is, first and foremost, the grape that's in it. It is Lemberger. For some of you that don't know, Lemberger is a grape variety of Central European origin, also known as Blau Frankish, that we had no idea existed here in the region. And it turned out like it just, like the best things, like everywhere else in life, happened by coincidence, or whatever you want to call it, synergy. We were talking to one of our favorite farmers in Niagara-on-the-Lake, well, one of our favorite farmers in Ontario. It just happens to be in Niagara-on-the-Lake, where we buy our Gewürztraminer for the Vibrance from. And we were asking about the red grapes, and in our head, what we had was, Cabernet Franc, Gamay, Pinot. He's like, yeah, like I have some red grapes, but I can maybe give you a ton, but it's only like Lemberger. Like nobody wants that. And the Eastern European in me said, like, what do you mean nobody wants that? We want that. Like, let's try it out. Because that happens to be a grape that shares a lot in common in terms of genetics with Cabernet Franc. Francois and I went to see the vineyard, and it looked like a vineyard that belongs. And for us, that is always the main thing. Because in order to work with as little intervention as possible, you have to have the healthiest and most complex material available to you. The healthiest and most complex material is available to you if you respect nature and see what belongs. Because if you are working with grapes that are not necessarily belonging to the environment, just by definition, you will have to be interfering way more, even if not in the winemaking, in the viticulture, 100%. So when you see a vibrant plant that, even in a difficult vintage is like, you see the life within the vines, you see that they're not affected, they don't seem affected by all the diseases that are plaguing the rest of the region. It's pretty much nature telling you pay attention. And for us, paying attention, it's the start of how you discover what is relevant and what can empower you to work the way we want to work. So Lemberger it is. Um, we were tasting the grapes. They were tasting beautiful, like juicy and spicy and floral, very as the refined palate of Francois always says, like, it's not too French. And I'm like, it's not French at all. It's way more, how do I put it? Like, it's got a different sensibility about it. And that sensibility expresses beautiful, wonderful things, but it's got meatiness to it and like fire inside it that you don't necessarily associate with French winemaking or Italian for that matter, but more so the more foundational odor, but not as refined cultures of the East. And he's going all the way to Georgia. So he can only give us 1 ton of Lemberger, and the Pinot and Cabernet Franc there were not this genius of ours that's like, let's put those two together. They were what can possibly go with this wine that does not interfere with the Lemberger itself, only because we needed to fill the tank. 1 ton in and of itself was not enough to fill it's an open top fermenter that we were working with. Now, as that wine fermented, like my strongest memories of 2018 are the harvest of 2018 are going into the fermentation room and like it inhabited the whole winery with this completely strange like just not mystical, but mysterious perfume that was not only very floral, very fruity, but also had a certain like meatiness, certain carnality to it. And we never actually thought like, oh, we'll do it on its own. It would have been addition to one of the other wines that we were making. But the identity of that blend rose so prominently that there was no way around it. We would have done both ourselves and the wine a disservice by mixing it with other things. So we decided to do it on its own, and because there was so little of it, 1 ton of grapes, let me tell you, does not give you a lot of wine. And just again, by pure coincidence, some of our like friends and best supporters from the Toronto restaurants, which happen to be it's like Over Budget Inc. is the name of the group, but that's Bar Isabel, Bar Raval, Quetzal, Bar Piquet. they were here tasting, and it's like, we can actually, like, if you're willing, we'll take all of this. So we did that for them, because we never actually do special labels. We've only done it for 2 people, or for, like, it's these guys and Burdock Brewery, like, which is pretty much an extension to the family. But we decided to just save it for them, not for any other reason, but just because I think it was a total production of 160 cases. And let me tell you that, like, that's not enough for anyone or anybody. So they had been working with it up until we found ourselves in the situation that we are. They were down to the last, like, I think 50 or so cases. And because they're not doing takeout or any of those things, we decided to take it back and make it available to our customers. Now, it was so instructive, this wine, and so exciting for us, that, like, next year, like, meaning the year that just passed, 2019, rather than 1 ton of grapes, we committed to taking half of the vineyards. So this is a blend. Again, it became a blend that is going to be the Lemberger, this time with a little bit of Cabernet Franc, just as this one has, but instead of Pinot, it's got like a smidgen of Merlot. It is not in bottle yet, but it will be in bottle next Wednesday, because next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it's when we're bottling our young 2019 wines, and it's going to be released, like, in the next couple of months. Now, what I want to say about it is, I don't know how many of you have the Lila or not. I feel like I'm absolutely splurging, because there isn't much of it left. So when I went to open a bottle, I'm like, it's for the tasting. I cannot talk about the wine without tasting the wine. But I will tell you why we bottled it young. Same thing, like the 2018 Lila is bottled after 8 months of aging. The 2017 Monsieur Rouge is bottled after 11 months of aging. Now, both of those wines, the reason for bottling them young, it's because we want to capture their strongest virtues, so to speak. And their strongest virtues, them coming from, like, mostly young vines, are the vibrancy, that made an appearance in the title of this talk, the explosion of fruit, the energy of youth that they have. Do they have structure? They absolutely do. Is that a wine that you should store for 10 years? I mean, it's up to you. The wine will not be dead after 10 years. I can absolutely assure you. But what you will see within the wine, it's bones. And the most prominent characteristic of what makes the wine, what shapes its identity, which is the fruit, and, as I said, the energy of youth, will be not necessarily gone, but definitely tamed. And if you're doing something in order to celebrate its youthfulness, there's no point in, I mean, you can tire it and see how far it goes if you're in the, how do I put it, if you want to do it for an intellectual exercise. But if you are concentrating on the pleasure principle, I would advise drinking these wines, like, now or within the next 3 to 5 years. Both Francois and I are, as Francois calls it, like, structure freaks, meaning that even when we try to make simpler wines because of the simpler fruit, they surprise us constantly with how much more structure we've managed to, or how much we've been successful in highlighting their structure, as opposed to making them, the wines that I call are like 1, 2, 3, like, meaning, here's my perfume, here's my palette, and here's the finish. Bye bye. Nice to meet you. It was all wonderful, but nothing that's gonna make you think a little bit further. And I'm not saying this is like a self-complimenting statement. If anything, it's actually the opposite. because sometimes we do, we do want to make wines within that youth uh, paradigm. That being said, the moment something shows us any kind of growth, and by something I mean the fruit on the vine, we will never capture it earlier in order to make it accessible earlier. It's just a natural tendency of ours to go towards longer aging, because longer aging, uh, longer elevages, highlighting structures, those are all things that end up contributing to the life of the wine. And again, it all comes down to a personal taste. We both like drinking older wines and seeing nuances within them that only patience and time can reveal. That being said, we now like, capturing young vines within that period of time. It's also a lesson that we're learning every year because, you know, not to make too obvious of a joke, you have to drink something while you're waiting for the truly serious guys to come around. Just as I was mentioning last week, the 2016 Cabernet Franc is like right over there. The 2015 Cabernet Franc was right next to it as of 2 weeks ago. Now it's getting prepared to bottle, but that's been like 5 years of aging. So in the meantime, on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday night, if you want something that satiates and still has the qualities that, at least for us, are the hallmarks of what Pearl Morris said wine should carry: structure, texture, balance, dynamics with food. All of those things are present within the young wines, but in a way more approachable, in a way more open, in a way more engaging kind of way. Now, between the two, um, I gotta say, like, where my preference lies is probably in the Lila, but for no other reason apart from its novelty, right? Like, we've worked with Pinot, Cabernet Franc, and Gamay, the three things that are in the Métier Rouge for a while. It's like, which is the more complex wine? It's probably the Métier Rouge. What I like drinking more now, it's more the Lila. But again, because it's just very surprising. It makes you think a lot, and not in terms of like finding the meaning of life, but more so in discovering a material that we're now committed to working with, but we're not haven't had the chance to explore in as much depth as we have with the grapes that are in the Métier Rouge. The other thing that the Lila has, I'm just going to take a sip over the Métier Rouge, and then I'm going to talk about what the Métier Rouge has over the Lila. Is this kind of, as I said, like it's a very carnal wine. It's got like a spice towards it that reminds me of spiciness in Niagara, as we discussed before. It's like, to us, it's one of its predominant defining features. But then spiciness, as expressed through the Lemberger grape, has this almost like mysterious, alluringly dark quality that is very, very engaging. And what I'd like you to not necessarily think about, but keep in mind when you're enjoying the wine, because it's more important to enjoy than to think about it, is that this is a wine that it fills your mouth. The palate is rather big, very satiating, but then like the tannins are so smooth. They contain the wine, but they don't really sit like or dry out your mouth in a way that you would expect from any of these grapes, including the Pinot, which in Niagara, depending on the vintage, can be quite tannic. So when thinking about what to eat with it or like drink with it, I often before have told our staff here at the restaurant or the teams at any of the restaurants that were carrying it, you can think about it as what white wine in a red form, because this is a wine that will go as much with food that is supposedly only compatible with white wines. Um, obviously don't do like, tilapia with lemon butter sauce and think that the lila's not gonna go with it. But any like um, meatier fish, anything that can complement the structure of the wine itself, its textural components, will not have the same confrontational relationship with a red wine as it would with many others, just because of the smoothness of the tannin, just because of the way the wine glides, the way it behaves. It's quite how do I put it? It's very textural, and there's no drying elements to it. And then of course there are the flavors. When it comes to the season that will hopefully be going now, because I just walked in from outside, and it's not pretty out here, but at least it's somewhat warm. It's like raining, dreary, but spring is around the corner. Having a red wine that can be drunk with a little bit of a light chill and is not heavy, at least for me, it's like the perfect wine for the summer. That's why I'm so excited for the continuation of that wine. It's 2019. It's not Lila, because of course there is Lila for the guys at over budget, and they are like, it's a little bit different than this one. It's also based on Lemberger, but because we had the amount of wine, the amount of Lemberger that we can source in 2019, the new Lemberger wine that's going to be available too, it's called Prince-Sauty. It's a French word, and we're going to have a special talk about that. But you'll probably see it in the next month and a half or two. So are any of you drinking the Lila currently? Oh.
No.
Okay. Use old barrels for aging or keep the freshness. So thank you, Milton. Like, Milton is still there for me because I haven't paid any attention to the wines, to the questions yet. Yeah, yes, the Lila is done in 100% old demi-muet because two separate reasons. First and foremost, when you put stuff in new oak or in smaller barrels, it better have, like for us, again, like everything that I'm saying goes with, this is our personal opinion. This is our explanation and findings, like explorations and findings. They, a lot of the time, may not be contradictory, but are certainly not necessarily the same as what most people will say. We only put wine in smaller barrels or in new wood here and there when the wine has inherently enough structure in itself to be able to digest it, be supplemented by the structure of the oak without the oak interfering on an organoleptic level with the wine. So when you're trying to capture the youth of the wine, you will absolutely 100% go into neutral woods, be it like demi-muet, which are the barrels that are twice the size of a normal barrel pretty much, or the foudre, that are the barrels that are behind me. 8 months in neutral demi-muet is the élevage of the 2018 Lila. The 2017 Métier Rouge, it's a combination because all three of its components were aged separately. Because as I said, we didn't plan to make a blend until in a blending trial, it became obvious that this is the best wine on the table. The Pinot Noir was aged in foudre again, but not like this. It's just foudre, just another name for saying like a big oak container. They are 100% Austrian oak, which is something that we started working since 2014. That's where we normally ferment, but we ordered some that have a lid on top that allows you to age the wine there as well. Again, they're like 3-ton vessels, which allows us to age young wines with a lot of fruit in a big volume. That in and of itself is how you get to the brilliance of the wine, how you preserve the fruit. So that's how the Pinot was aged. The Cabernet Franc was aged, fermented and aged in concrete. And the Gamay was in a combination between foudre, and then, concrete and then foudre. So the attitude towards those two, even though the elevages are very, very different, at the same time, the idea is the same. Allow the fruit to shine, allow the vivacity to express itself. Don't plump it up, don't weigh it down, don't do any of those things that will take away from the energy of the wine, because this is its identity and this is what we like to preserve. As I was saying last week when I was talking about the Fougue Chardonnay, as some of our vines that have been young and youthful are now entering into a different period of their development, we see we start approaching them completely differently. Now, while before we would capture them at 8 or 11 months, we're now extending the aging to 18 months because, no matter how hard one tries, and even if it's the best, or how do I put it, the most, I think the easiest thing to do currently in the current climate, and I don't mean the current climate generally, but in the current wine climate where vin du soif or wines for thirst are so popular, is to make those wines, roll them out, even like if your fruit is serious, just like capture them after 8 months or like 11 months, whatever it is, put them on the market, don't think twice about it, roll. I personally have had some, like last year when we went to France, some wines from beautiful 100-year-old fruits that was done in that way, and they were what I call, like, there was nothing wrong with them in terms of they were not bad wines or anything like that, but I call that sort of approach like liquid schizophrenia. Because if you have something that can tell you so much, that can teach you so much, why are you making a vin du soif from it is beyond me. And when we asked the couple of producers that we were tasting, but why? And said like, well, that's what the natural wine buyers in Paris want to drink. And this is where, not to go on a rant, but I have a little bit of an issue with the current culture, because as much as young and vibrant wines are the talk of the day, we as a community and as a wine drinking culture, generally speaking, are in a grave danger of forgetting that wines can also be completely different, that it's not only about the fruit, that wine can reveal all sorts of things to you that you didn't know you had within them. But in order for the wine to tell you that, it needs to stay alive for a certain time. In order for it to stay alive for a certain time, you have to give it the opportunity to stay alive. That means allowing it to develop that structure and texture that it inherently has. Now, that structure and textures, like, guess what? It's all about of time and of patience. So with us, again, it is a matter of personal preference, generally speaking, to make the wines as complex and as long-lived as they want to be, just because we like the way they taste. Like right now, if I'm tasting any of the wines from our library, with every bottle, I'm discovering more and more and more and more. That being said, when you have young fruit, when you have fruit that jumps out of a glass, like putting structure on it is like putting a scaffolding around the building. You I mean, it may be necessary to hold the building together, but at the same time, you cannot see what it is, like what the identity, the real life, the real energy of the wine, or like the real shape and form of the wine is. So when we have that, we will never put that structure, we will not impose the structure, just as we're not gonna simplify the structures of the vines or the fruit that can give us all of that. We're not gonna fakely complexify fruit that whose identity is not that, because that in a way it's like, I mean, it's not like, I don't want to say it's not honest, but it's not honest by our standards. And this brings me, let me just check the questions first. Yes, I found the Métier Rouge tastes better the longer I let it decant. Incredible flavor transformation. Well, thank you. All of our wines, generally speaking, unless they are in a very tight phase, because when wines are in a tight phase of their life, what happens is that they can kind of come in parts a little bit faster, but I've said that a million times and I'm gonna keep repeating it. Don't ever be afraid of letting any Pearl Morissette wine be open for like, oh, like forget about a day or two. That's nothing for us. A week, 2 weeks. We've had some for months. Before we started this, we just actually, for those of you that were here last week, I showed you the blending trial. So those blending trials have been going on for 6 weeks now. Those are all the wines that are going into bottle on Monday and Tuesday next week. And part of the reason behind letting them die, as Francois puts it, is to see how stable they are in the presence of oxygen in full light, as you can see here, without our interference. The interference part of it meaning more, sulfuring, over sulfuring, or fining and filtering. So I can absolutely guarantee you that every wine that bears a Pearl Morissette label will master, unless you're a person that finishes a bottle of wine in 6 months, it will be good every time. Like, you open a bottle and you keep on going to it and keep on like discovering it, it will be good for absolutely sure, like for at least a month. The more complex the wine is, the longer it'll be good, and that is in direct relation to how much structure it has. But let's talk about a little bit of the Métier Rouge, because this is a wine. So Wild de Lila, again, 3 separate grapes co-fermented together. The bridges that they build between them are, they happen from the beginning of the life, from the get-go, which is, I think, an easier way for the grapes to get to know each other. While with the Métier Rouge, you have 3 separate ones, like with their own identities, knowing who they are, then being put together. You have to allow for them to build those things, not during the active processes of fermentation and somewhat active processes of élevage, but them as finished wines. So while the Lila, when going to bottle, did not react as much, it is because it's already complete. They're already together. While the Métier Rouge, at first, when we gave it some time to blend before going into bottle, but still, bottling again is a big shock, probably the biggest shock the wines experience. And you see them, you kind of wines like what it's called, the bottling shock. Right after bottle shock or during bottle shock, the wine show its pieces, like it comes undone and then comes back together. Now, as then it continues aging in bottle, you have a completely different experience. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I cannot underline it enough. We learn so much with every new blend that we're doing, both about the blends, about the way the grapes correspond, and about the possible outcomes of it. Because even when we put them together, what happens is we have a situation of our best possible guess. And I want to touch a little bit upon it, but our best possible guess, it's still like, and I'm just going through my head, but I can tell you 100% of the time has never been 100% accurate to what the wine will give you. Knock on wood, the wines have always given us more than we imagined we are capable of, and shown us what are the harmonies that exist within Niagara, that allow them to express the way they're expressing. And in that way, blending is just another pathway into discovering, at least for us, the true identity of Niagara. And by what I mean by trying to complete identity of Niagara, how many things are possible here that are not possible in any other place, which is AKA terroir. You can call it that. So by staying away from subjectivity, by staying away of predetermined biases, and again, even with blending, observing, taking the time to notice things, and then make your most intelligent response to it. You put that back into the wine squirt, and then what the wine gives you back, it's the lesson. It's the lesson that informs our decisions for next year, or helps us see, oh, this is what Gamay does here. Oh, that is why that previous vintage, like the Gamay was behaving in such and such a way. And now I really want to talk a little bit about blending, but before I do that, I'm gonna look at some questions. So if you guys have questions, shoot them out now. And where does the name come from, and why an octopus? Okay, so the name comes from, I think, a big, probably an over 200 email thread between us and the guys at Bar Isabel, Bar Raval, Quetzal, Tennessee Tavern, Bar Piquet, everybody involved. Because what we wanted the name to be, it's something that sort of catches, like, is an allusion to all the flavors that the wine itself has, which for us were mostly, it's a very floral wine. And to me, it always reminded me of like lilac, peonies. It has, but at the same time, it has that meatiness about it. So honest, I still remember those days with that thread. I'm like, oh my God, like it went on and on and on and on. And we finally agreed on Lila. It's something like short, like catchy, and something that we loved, they loved. The octopus is an artist, like a friend of theirs rendition, and it actually is a pure 100% Bar Isabel kind of like tip of the hat, which is, as I'm sure you know, like their octopus dish is one of the most famous dishes that they have. Plus all the different ends of the octopus, all the different, I don't know, tentacles are like the different restaurants using it. So we don't really like think too much about it when something just has the right energy and the right vibe. And this being only our second collaboration, we want everybody, like, or the people that we're collaborating it, to have as much input as we do, just the way they want us to be as happy with the final product, like, and its packaging as they are. And it just on the label, it says Pro Morissette and OVB. And this is the thing, like, we're not the kind of people that will do a wine, like a special label and say, oh, this is, you know, such and such wine, this is what it's called. We are proud of our work, and we hope that people that love the wine and want to represent it are also proud of it. So the dynamics of collaboration are both evident within the wine and hopefully on the packaging. The next one, the next Lila coming up, has a completely different label. It's a different artist, but it's also a completely different wine. The only a parallel with this one that they're both based on Lemberger, but vintage-wise speaking, very, very different expression. Okay, love the Lila over the past hour. Where does the, okay, okay, what is the proportion of each grape type in the two wines? So, quoting off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure I got it right. The Lila is about 51-52% Lemberger, then 30 or like 28-30% Cabernet Franc, and the rest of Pinot. While in the Métier Rouge, what you have is predominantly Pinot, 52% Pinot, 30, and I know this just because I don't know why, but I remember the exact proportions. The percentage of Gamay right here in the Métier Rouge is 12.8%, and I guess the Cabernet Franc is 36.2%, but this is not how it's written in the technical notes. And I'll tell you why I remember this, because this is something that I didn't cover, but it's been a fascinating lesson. So the first métier, the Métier Rouge 2013 Pinot Cabernet Franc. Here we have a completely different wine, and made that much different by the third edition, Gamay, 12.8%. Now, if you had told me in 2013 or any previous year before 2017 that 12.8% of like any grape can actually define the wine, I mean, I wouldn't have laughed in your face because everything is possible. But let's say I would have said, like, I don't know if you're correct, but why? Now, that synergy that the Gamay provides, even it being like such a small proportion of that wine, is the synergy that elevates the Métier Rouge to a completely different level of a blend. Now, all of this that I'm about to say, it's things that we've discovered after we made the wines. Not, you know, we're not these like crazy professors that sit with it and say, oh, let's put this and let's put that. The Gamay acts as the bridge between those two grapes because it has similarities both with the Pinot in terms of its juiciness, in terms of its proportion to skin to juice ratio, skin to pulp ratio, I mean, and with the Cabernet Franc in terms of its spiciness, in terms of its like kind of the nature of its tannin. So the Pinot and the Cabernet Franc on their own, they can like hook with each other, and they do beautifully so in Niagara. But in our experience with the time when we did that in 2013, it took a long time for the harmony to come together, which is only normal. Again, two grapes getting to know each other. Now, what the Gamay does in the Métier Rouge, it's provide the pathway between the two. And that, like, the economy of energy by the inclusion of the Gamay, it also boosts the whole wine, brings it up to a whole other level. And when I was making the post about what we're gonna talk today, I mentioned Chinese philosophy, and I will tell you why without getting like too nerdy. But I think it's I don't know, like you tell me if it's interesting to hear our thoughts behind it. What in the process of trying to discover um, how we think about blending, because again, it's a very natural process for us. If anything, I probably had a little bit of a why, like, we've been like 100% single vineyard, you know, single grape variety for like so much of their wines. Why are we blending? And not why are we blending, because I understand why we blended. It was obvious. It was in the glass. It was the best wine on the table. But how do you reconcile a practice that just by definition has a lot more human inclusion or humans and inherently a lot more human judgment and bias without that we carry without us knowing that we carry it. So how do you reconcile that with our overall attitude towards being like stepping out of the way? And one question led to another, because as I said earlier, it's very clear to me, but it's clear on an instinctual level. It's not as easy to put that into words. So we always talk about balance. We always talk about beauty, and not in like, hopefully it doesn't come off in a self-ingratiating way, but our idea of beauty being um, like embracing like the materials we're given, the vintage that we find ourselves working with, and discovering the wine within those two things. Balance being of utmost importance. Now, I'll tell you that if you look up balance in a few dictionaries, it always talks about contrasting elements or forces that come together even though they carry contrasting charges or whatever you want to call it. So, because this is not what we do, it's almost like this is the kind of blending that I call blending by assembly. To me, this is, it's not a forced balance, but it's human balance. It's balanced, born out of human like judgment and perceptions and appreciations. And this is not how we work. So we don't like, oh, this wine has fruit, this one has acid, and the tannins want to come from here, and let's put them all together. That is as far as we're thinking as like everything. Like it's just not how we think. So the kind of balance that I'm trying to describe, it's a balance of harmony, of not necessarily contrasting parts, but parts that go together and give you more completeness, completeness of expression of the wine, and that in and of itself being a completeness of expression of this area, Niagara, our area, in this particular vintage. So in order to be able to do that, first and foremost, you have to know your materials. I heard a beautiful quote once from an Oregon winemaker, and she said that she feels like that blending can be the highest answer to the vintage, because if grapes go together, grow together, they probably have ways of interacting with each other that will give you the more nuanced, the subtlest and the richest expression of this place. So that was close to how we think, but still not it. So in my searches, I, believe me or not, actually Googled philosophy of balance without contrasting elements. I'm like, what is out there that comes close to the ideas that we have? Or is there anything out there? And that reminded me, like, like I just, there's all sorts of things that came up, but nothing was really close until I stumbled on the kind of like, what would I call it? a part of Taoist philosophy called Wu Wei. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm probably like bludgeoning it. And because in university, I actually took quantum mechanics, and a lot of quantum mechanics actually has to do with philosophy. And there's a lot of studies between those two things, like the most contemporary science and how it connects with some of the most ancient teachings. So that rang the bell, and I explored it. And this is the kind of truest way, or the most representative way, of how we think about blending. The energies already exist there. The non-intervention, like of in from our end, is not to put things together that we think go together, but with to allow for things that are exhibiting complementary things as opposed to contrasting things, come and meld in a way which, again, you don't have any idea. Let me tell you, when we were making the Métier Rouge, what am I drinking now? I would be lying if I said this is what I thought we'll be experiencing. No, but what we allow to happen, they call it the Wu Wei, like doesn't have, of course, a translation, but it's action through inaction. We allow ourselves first to learn by observing over the years and have a good sense of like the materials that we work with and their possible methods of their possible patterns of expressing themselves. And from then on, something else becomes obvious. Just like it was obvious that the Lemberger belongs, it is obvious that the Cabernet Franc and Gamay belong in the area. It's like the wines themselves carry, when we're tasting them through tanks, either a similar or very different kind of energy. So when you are to put those things together, if you're not contrasting them, but you keep like bringing, like not adding, not in, like not how do I put it, not slapping makeup on things, but allowing things with grooves to find the other grooves and see like what happens. This is what blending can give you. And in a way where before I thought that blending is just like can be a cop out, which it is true, it can definitely be a cop out in some situations. It's also produced some of the most resilient wines in the world, like Bordeaux is blended, Chateauneuf du Pape is blended all the time. But the approach towards blending that does not require, like it does require human imprint, because we're still acting out on what we consider beautiful. We just happen to be the kind of people that, generally speaking, what we consider beautiful is something that we want to learn from our environment, as opposed to taking our ideas, taking our concepts, whether wine-wise or life-wise, and imposing them on wines. It's probably the most revealing and definitely kind of the most gratifying journey as of recently. Because on one side, you do have the 19th Street Vineyard wines, and there you can lose yourself forever. But we're not even close to fully figuring out the material there, in order to be able to even think about what would happen if we blend. With these guys, you can allow yourself to do that, and by virtue of that action, learn more about your area, understand your, again, quote unquote, terroir better. So, and that is how, at least for myself, and I'm open to any and all criticism, please shoot it my way. This is how I've reconciled our idea of non-intervention and like stepping out of the way with a process that in and of itself demands, how do I put it, demands a subjective, um, like a subjective appreciation of something. The that like now, that being said, oh my God, guys, I almost completely forgot because we got on a philosophical note. Rosé, that is another blend, and I'm just gonna take a white sheet of paper to show you its color. It's not in a bottle yet. That's why it's the glass. This is a glass straight from the tank, from the other side. But so the Roslana is back. The last vintage of it, well, the first and last vintage of it that we did was 2016. And now here it is again. We are very, very excited for it. That is one of the ones going into bottle on Monday. And again, this is a blend. It is like we haven't done the technical sheets yet, but it's probably gonna count to 90% or so Pinot Noir Rosé with the remainder, whatever that is, of Gamay, 100%, and not Gamay Rosé, but Gamay red wine. How did we get to that? Like the Pinot Noir, in and of itself, it's a beautiful wine. Actually, we saved, I think it's 2 barrels of it, because Francois wanted to have something that is 100% pure Pinot Noir Rosé and prove me wrong in the long term that it's going to be better than the inclusion of the red Gamay. We'll see who wins that one. But this one was done because, to me, as wonderful and pure as the Pinot Noir Rosé was, it just didn't have that extra charm, extra spark, like that crunchiness that you can bite into. And the first Roslana that we did was a combination of the same grapes in completely different proportions, completely different élevage. But yet again, this is another blending proposition that it's not so much us, like we are making a more prominent stamp on the wine itself, but it's hopefully in a contributing as opposed to a defining way. We don't want to define, we want to contribute and make, allow the wines, those two, like, you know, in this case, the Pinot and the Gamay, to do their own bridges and go to a complete, like, I can absolutely guarantee you it will surprise us in 6 months, in a year. I've been blind tasted on the Roslana myself, and even though I recognize it like as a Pearl Morris said wine, I recognize it as a Roslana just by virtue of elimination. If I didn't, like, you know, because I mean, there's a certain stamp to Pearl Morris said that, like, I hopefully I'm always and forever able to recognize regardless of the wine. So for me that was obvious, but it was not at all obvious that the Roslana would be capable of going there. And I know that as much as this wine is so gratifying and crunchy and delicious right now, in 6 months, it will hopefully far exceed our expectations. But regardless of the fact if it's far exceeding or meeting them, I know it won't be what we think we're making. If there's one thing that I found to be a constant with our blending, is that no matter how intelligent our guesses are, the wines are full of surprises, and it's always been in the up to this point in the best possible of ways. I'm just looking at and seeing that I'm already way past the time. Send the rosé set. Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Because I don't know how many I've met so far. Oh, Svetlana. does the Cab Franc come from the 19th Street vineyard in the Cuven Madeleine, but the home vineyard in the Métier Rouge and the Lila? So, in Cuven Madeleine, the Cab Sauvignon, or Cab Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, it's 100% 19th Street vineyard. In the Métier Rouge, it's home farm vineyard, young vines. In the Lila, it is actually 19th Street vineyard, but not by any premeditated decision of ours. It's just that was what was around in the time and place. And this is also something that it's kind of a hidden attribute to the Lila, even though it drinks so fine and so smooth. The fact that it has however many, like 28% or whatever of Cabernet Franc from the 19th Street is already it already tells you that the Lila is gonna go a lot longer than we think it will, because the structure that this most series of Cabernet Franc in 2018 brings, and I can tell you 2018 Cabernet Franc, Cuven Madeleine, it's on the other side, aging in Foudre. If you wanna know what is to have your face turned inside out, once all of these things pass and you come around, just call me, I'll pour you some of it. It's 2018 Cabernet Franc from 19th Street, Cuven Madeleine, future Cuven Madeleine, potentially, knock on wood, the best Cuven Madeleine that we've ever done. So that is in the Lila, again, 28 or like 30%, whatever it is. But it's very hard to tell that the structure is there because of the plushness of the Lemberger fruit, as well as the Pinot Noir that's in it. Does not allow the structure to express in a more prominent way. But that wine will live despite its appearances. Is the new Lila also available to us or restaurant only? Well, we shall see, because we bottled it especially for the restaurants with the hope that they will reopen and they will have something for themselves. You know, just a continuing of that relationship, friendship, and just collaboration. That's how we work. Like when we like working with someone, we continue working with them. Now, even though that Lila may not be available to you, hopefully it will not be available to you, because that would mean that the restaurants are open. There is the Prince Sauté. That's probably the first time Milton's hearing that name, and it is a complicated name, and I'll tell you all about it, but it pretty much what it happens to mean is like spontaneity, letting go, which the character of the Lila and the Prince Sauté are all about, the character of the Lemberger is all about, and our attitude towards blending, turns out, is all about as well. That will be available once it goes into bottle, next week, once we make sure it's feeling comfortable in bottle and it's not overreacting. So there will be Lemberger for the people, not the Lila, but a completely different type of Lemberger. But it's very, very tasty. Now, in true Pearl Morissette manner, we're gonna go into the summer with a full lineup of red wines, amongst which the Lemberger, then the Cabernet Sauvignon that I'm gonna talk a little bit later. What else? There's also like a Cab Merlot blend. Pretty much what I'm saying is that we'll have the rosé, no white wine, and a couple of red wines going into June and July. But as crazy as it sounds, like this is how the wines, happen around. And the ones that will be available actually happen to be, as far as I'm concerned, the perfect red wines. Out of them, the Prince Sauté, I can guarantee you, the Lemberger one, I believe will be the one that people fall in love with, because it is just, how do I put it? It's like even when I like pour it out of a tank, it doesn't care. It just like comes at you like it's got all these like floral, spicy aromatics, but then you drink it, and just like the lila, it has that meatiness and savory quality to it. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm very excited, honestly. Like when bottling is starting to come around, like now, um, because we've examined these wines so much, we've gone through so many trials. There's a point where it's like, okay, I can't do it anymore, but I cannot wait for them to go to bottle and then see them. Because bottling 1000% will change the way, it's not going to change the wines, it's going to change the way they express themselves in the short, in the short term. Uh, like the Lemberger, I we hope, both Francois and I think that it's not gonna take too much of a bottle shock. Knock on wood, because of course we're not gonna release it if it's bottle shocked. But and it's gonna definitely like I don't believe there's anything that can contain the exclusivity of that wine. It's like I'm definitely like it's hard to pick a favorite because I love everything that's going into wine. There's some more serious going into bottle. There's some more serious wines going into bottle as well, but they won't be released for a while. But between the rosé, the Principi, and the Fury, which is the 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, I don't know that even with a gun to my forehead, I can pick a favorite. Like completely different wines, completely different expressions, completely different sentiments. All of them, like I'm gonna sound like a drunkard right now, but when you go home with and you fill the bottle of the rosé and you're like that's gonna be good for 2 days. Not in my experience. It goes like that. It's like lovely, 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 lovely. You are so excited about the Lemberger. Would you do a single varietal of it? Yes, we definitely will. Or would. So let me put it this way. The plan for this year's Lemberger was to do a single variety just because we had so much of it. But again, we cannot escape our processes and who we are, because in the blending trial, the fact of the matter was that with the addition of Cabernet Franc and Merlot, the wine was just better. So I actually, we talked about keeping two demi-muets of 100% Lemberger on their own, uh, just to see what happens and how they evolve in comparison with the blend that we made. But I don't know whether we for like it just in the commotion of like racking and blending that got lost. Um, and it was my idea, but I think halfway through the kind of bench trials, I was so convinced that the blend is the way to go that that sort of took over my curiosity about what would Lemberger be 100% on its own. Okay, so 350. Okay, I'm over again, but thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you learned something, and as I said last time, please feel free. Like I know everybody through the confirmation emails has my email. Feel free to email me any questions. Anybody, I know a couple of people ask me about wines from different vintages that they have in their cellars and were curious to try. I will get back to you. I absolutely promise you through email, because even though I plan to answer those questions now, I'm already way beyond the 1 hour mark. And the other thing I wanted to say is that as crazy this, like it's just unusual for me at least to be doing tastings like that without being able to kind of sense your reactions and whether you like the wines or you don't, or what's your experience with them. It is another thing that I believe it's very, at least for me, on a personal, completely egotistical level, it's been a very positive side about it, is that it's making me think of, as I said earlier, how to put our instinctual, highly instinctual processes uh, into words and give you an understanding of how we approach things. Because at the end of the day, what I do believe actually differentiates Pearl Morissette from many, and what people tune in, whether subconsciously or consciously in, is the result of those processes, the result of our attitude and outlook into life, into the world, into what we consider valuable, I think, you know, original or idiosyncratic, beautiful, and balanced. So through my explorations of pretty much what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that me trying to explain it to you is making it is making me put it into words for myself, and it's leading to a lot of discoveries. So because I don't want to bore anybody with it, I would say that where you can find those discoveries is if you go to the blog on our website. I'm just about to finish I think would be the second installment of the blog, which will have to do with, I mean, those two wines, yes, but more so as protagonists within the story of a blending, and why we think that is or that can ultimately be not only the highest possible answer to the circumstances that you find yourself each year, but also an amazingly rich source of knowledge as to what this area is and what are the harmonies that nature, what is the drift of nature within Niagara, and how can we be better from one year to another in highlighting that. Because for us, at the end of the day, beauty and balance, whether through single grape varieties or through blends, alongside obviously like structure and texture, are the most important values, and what we try for every single one of our wines to be manifesting, whether it's in this like thirst quenching wines that are all about the vibrancy and the energy of youth, or whether it's in the black bows and the madeleines that we still have to talk about, single vineyard, single grape variety wines that, without sounding too, again, like self-ingratiating, I'm saying this on a completely personal level, not as from Anna. Those are wines, the black bows and the Cabernet Francs, that the madeleines, that you can definitely lose yourself into for quite a few hours, if not days, and some of our biggest teachers, that's for sure. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Hope you and Francois do a single varietal Pinot if you don't already. Yes, we have done it. We already do, and it's currently in its third trial of trying to pay. I'm gonna stir shit now. Of trying to pass the VQA tasting panel. Supposedly, it's not Pinot enough, even though both Francois and I think it's the first time it's happened with Pinot Riesling regularly. Chardonnay sometimes, Pinot it's the first one. I don't want to put Francois in here, but like I definitely think it's the best Pinot we've done. 2018 Pinot Noir. It's so far failed tasting panel twice. It's currently on its way to the third tasting panel. So hopefully it passes, and we are able to have it out and about at some point, like later this year or early next year. It's a beautiful, beautiful Pinot. I don't really talk often in a very complimentary terms about Pinot, but this one is it's a show stealer. So thank you, everyone. I hope to see you all next, what is it, Thursday today. And not to get you overly excited about it, but I love all Pearl Morissette wines, and there's some of them, however, that are first and foremost the foundational reason of why I'm here. And secondly, to me, the biggest, widest, deepest insight of what it is to make or to try and make world-class wine of a completely new idiosyncratic character in a region like Niagara that hasn't been explored and doesn't have centuries-old history. And also on a personal emotional level, the wines that I tend to get me most excited, it's the Black Bows. There's no going around that. I love every single one of our wines. With the Black Bows, it's like that to the max. And next week we're gonna be tasting two of the best vintages, actually. I mean, two of the best. If you ask me which the best one is, I'll reveal that next week. But 2013 Black Bow, drinking beautifully, and 2017 that just got released a month ago, very similar to the 13, but obviously 4 years younger than it. So it will be a good way to talk about time and patience in wine, and specifically in Riesling, and what they can gift you, like time and patience, that is, that like nothing else can. That even wines that at first you consider too weird, too taut, too straight, too punishing, if you just give them your patience, they will gratify, like, I don't want to say gratify you, they'll show sides of themselves that are the kind of beauty that you hope you're capable of, but never trust yourself for the wines that you make to have. So the 2013 Black Bow is definitely in that stage. The 2017 is arguably, must be, a much better wine than the 2013, just because there's 4 more years of knowledge into it, but of very similar proportions. So I can only imagine what that will be when it gets to the stage of the 2013 is. So on that note, I hope you all like Riesling and can join me next week. And again, please, like, any comments, questions, concerns, complaints, send me a note. It's Svetlana@pearlmorissette.com, and it should be in all the confirmation emails that Zoom sends. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Enjoy the wines.
Thank you.